Origin story, bro.
Origin story. It's usually I always want to start after high school, but then I realized there's so many fundamentals that built going to school and what I learned and what I had to counter learn and reteach myself. And the one that I always come back to is just like always being the bitch of the group, if that makes sense. Always being the weak one, always being the shy one, being the butt end of every joke. And I always blamed everybody else, like, oh, because guys are like that, right? If you can't stand up, if you can't hold your own, they're going to pick at you and take pieces and bite at your ankles until you bite back. And so there were definitely points in time in school where I had my breaking point and everybody was like, oh, don't fuck with him now. But we can wait until he calms down because he'll take it. So just kind of trying to recondition that and break out of those habits where I felt weak and I felt like, I wasn't good enough, whether that was because I didn't have the things that the cool kids had, or I just didn't have the mentality, or whatever it was. And definitely, with things like sports, those kinds of things, they were great, but I still didn't have any direction. I didn't know what way that I wanted to take things. I remember in grade 4, we were supposed to do a project about, what we wanted to be for the rest of our life. And already at, I don't even know what age that is, 9 years old, 8, 9 years old, they're already conditioning you to think about what you want to do. Like some kids wanted to be a dentist, some kids wanted to be a vet, some kids wanted to be a doctor, some kids wanted to be an engineer. But in grade 4, they knew what they wanted to do. And I'd say 60% of them changed, but there's still a good 40% that knew what they wanted to do from day one, and they went to school for it, and now they're doing it. And whether that's because their parents did it or their parents told them to do it is one thing, but like I remember breaking down in that class because we had a whole week to prepare for this, and the day came to present, and I had taken about 2 hours, maybe an hour the day before to try and put something together, and I had nothing. And so I remember in grade 4 crying in the class because I was the only kid that didn't have anything because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I thought I was weird for that, right? I was weird for the fact that I didn't want to be conditioned. I didn't want to be told what to do. I thought maybe I could be a marine biologist and work with animals because that sounded cool. But other than that, like working a job just sounded like it sucked. And so for me, it's always been this thing where I didn't want to just work for money. Eventually, I wanted to do more stuff. And so I got a job in school because I couldn't buy the clothes. Everybody was wearing American Eagle.
Aeropostale and
Aeropostale,
Hollister
right?
shit.
That one was cheaper, so that one, like,
Or
a little bit more people could have access to.
Lacoste
You
and
get
shit.
Hollister, you get Abercrombie and Fitch, and it was like, that was the cool kids. And I remember one day, I saw one of the kids brought in for their gym bag. They used the Hollister bag, and it's got like the Rip Dude on it. And like in middle school, I was like, oh, it'd be so cool to be that guy and be ripped and be on the bag, and like his face isn't on there, but it's the notoriety of it. It's the fact that he was jacked enough to be posted up like that. And I was like, I'd love to do that, but I had no area, no chance of ever accomplishing that. So I thought in my mind, and so I kind of just wiped it out from my thoughts. Puberty did me really well, so I'm super grateful for that. Thanks to the genes, the genetics, and the family, the heritage. But I also think back to how it developed and how it changed. And I remember going to school and the only clothes that I would wear were either hand-me-downs or we'd go to the bargain shop and my mom would buy me like these $8 jeans that I would be embarrassed to go to school in. Or by the end of it, I was just end up wearing like the school athletics. Like when you do sports, you get the sweatshirts and the sweatpants, and that would be the only thing I wore. And I remember in high school, after a week of wearing the exact same sweater, because I just love this sweater, but also just because I didn't have anything else that I enjoyed that wasn't a hand-me-down or that wasn't cool, you could say. And it was like a week straight, and she was like, you can't wear that anymore. Like, you have to change. And I was like, okay. People are talking about it. People are thinking about it in a way where, he's not enough. He doesn't fit in. He's not cool. Whatever the case was, all these limiting beliefs that I had conditioned myself, that I told myself, this inner dialogue that nobody had ever told me how to regulate and told me how important it was. I just said, fuck it. I'm going to make a decision now that I'm never going to be thought of like that again. So right from whatever day that was in grade 10, immediately after that, I started wearing khakis, loafers, flannels, dress shirts, cardigans, and I would layer up, do a couple layers of cardigans, beanies, scarves, you name it. And this is in high school, right? I'm the new kid. Um, but because I was like, oh, I'm gonna rock this, and I'm not gonna be like the weird guy that just wears a suit on a Monday just because it's a Monday, and he wears one that doesn't fit or anything. I'm gonna be like, okay, I'm going to start actually dressing the part, dressing out of my league, looking at what celebrities are wearing, people of, in the limelight. And by the end of, the 2 years at that high school when I came late, teachers were telling me, even after I graduated, people were saying I was best dressed in town. I don't know if I'd go that far, but being best dressed in high school, having that award, coming from this kid who was a loser, who only wore school athletics, who didn't have enough, who didn't have money, all these kinds of things to, you know, um, in hindsight, this was the dumbest thing I could have done, but it was a lot of fun, right? Wearing Gucci shoes and a Hugo Boss suit to my grad. And everybody's like, oh, what the hell is that? What is that? And so just from that point, with the cuff pants and making that mark in people's mind where it's like, oh, he's about fashion. So after I graduated, knew I didn't want to go back to school, kind of went to be a firefighter. That didn't work out. I don't like school. School doesn't like me. And I decided I don't like the system that it produces you into. So unless I was going to be a doctor, a lawyer,
Yeah.
Something where if you don't go to school, it doesn't make sense, right? But a lot of the time people go to school and it doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense. And so I knew that that wasn't the direction that I was going to take. So I had worked in sales before in school. I'd worked in a restaurant. After I graduated, I was working selling suits. And buddy and I went and traveled. We went to California, knew that was somewhere I wanted to be. I just enjoyed the energy, how, it's always a party. People are having fun. It's palm trees. It's nice weather. I knew I wanted that lifestyle, but I didn't know how to get it. Right. And all my friends were go to school, get a job, get married, have kids, repeat, repeat, repeat until they die. And I knew that I wasn't going to follow that trajectory. And that's not a jab against them, right? Obviously, if they're happy and content doing that, great. But if they're not happy doing that, then something needs to change. But you can lead a horse to water, right? I can only show them. And by doing this and shining my light, it'll, what's the saying? It'll subconsciously let others feel comfortable enough to shine their own. And so that's kind of how I started going about it. It's like, hey, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So if you just tell everybody what they should be doing and preaching to them, you're an asshole. Because it's like, well, who are you to tell me this stuff? Where it's like, oh, you know what? This is what I'm doing. This is what's working for me. And coming back to just what we're doing now and documenting the process and all of those things that it goes through. But I mean, after school, had no idea what I was doing, super lost. A buddy of mine actually, and I've never told it like this, and I'm super scared of being disrespectful, but it's something that hit the community so hard. One of the stars from school that everybody looked up to, the nicest guy. He just worked his ass off in sports and school. He actually OD'd and he was left in the park. And so that hit the community really hard. And I wasn't even close with the guy. I played football with him, and that shook me to my core, And so me thinking, oh, I got to make some money. Maybe I'll prevent that from ever happening again. I was like, oh, you know what? I could sell weed. And I was like, oh, you know what? I'll test it first so that if it is laced, like I'll be the one being hit with it, which is in hindsight so dumb and whatever. And I had fun with it and like, thought I was top G baller for a little while, and I was the guy until it started getting to randoms, and I was like, okay, like I'm not looking to be Scarface here and blow up, and like I didn't actually want it. I was like, oh, this is fun, this is cool, and this was before weed was legal, so I was like, oh, it's kind of you know what I mean, kind of got an edge. I feel like I'm being a badass where like I've lacked before, where I just, I wasn't the cool kid. Now everybody's coming to me, had that attention, had the had some sort of resource where people actually wanted to be around, creating the party, letting everybody come to you, that kind of thing. And that's where it started. From there, I got headhunted by a couple different companies, went door knocking, a ton of experience there, just meeting people, learning curve. I think the best way to understand yourself and human nature is put yourself in an uncomfortable situation where you're forced to talk to new people and forced to have conversations. And then from there, got headhunted, financial services industry, loved that. Along the way, there was a couple different things that happened to make me start thinking about what I wanted. First was um, coming from the fashion background. I was like, oh, there's always these things that I wanted to buy that I could never find anywhere. Like it probably took me 7 years to finally find a pair of overalls, and that was in 2017. But it was, since 2012 that I had been looking for a pair and hadn't been able to find them anywhere. And I had to go to Taiwan to get them, that kind of thing. And so I was just like, well, what if I make my own clothing line? Well, okay, perfect. Let's do that. I know there's a lot of competition. So what's the best way to get name recognition? Well, if you look at any big name, as soon as they drop something, it booms, right? So I was like, okay, well, if I already create name recognition, build my brand, build my name, then it'll be easier to drop a product based around that. So, I mean, you look at Ryan Reynolds, he's got Aviation Gin. You look at George Clooney, he's got his liquor. Uh, um, Wayne Gretzky, he's a hockey player. He doesn't know the first thing about fucking wine and whiskey, probably other than getting drunk with the boys, right? But obviously they haven't gone out of business, and there's a reason, because they already have that name recognition. And so I looked at that and I was like, okay, well, I can't just drop the clothing line right off the bat unless I just want to do t-shirts and hats, and I don't want to be like every other fucking belly button company.
It's generic. It's just a little shirt with a fucking little tag in here, print on.
Exactly. And like if my 12-year-old sister could do it, why would I be bringing myself down to that level to start something there? Right, where I was like, no, I want leather, I want streetwear,
quality,
dude, quality, but also
effort,
this vibe that nobody else can create. And it's not just going to be a t-shirt, it's going to be a way that the t-shirt sits that nobody's ever done before. Revolutionary. And just thinking about it that way, and I had all these ideas that I could never find, so I was like, well, fuck it, I'll make it my own. And so that was kind of my journey. I started building my dreams, my goals. That's where my modeling brand, King Pharaoh, came from initially. Was looking at, a streetwear and then also tailored suiting.
Tell us a little bit about okay, so pause.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how you felt in your childhood, and then you had that moment of truth, aha moment from that phase. From the childhood to after high school.
It wasn't even at that phase, which was the crazy thing for me, because I was still struggling. All through childhood, I had no direction, right? Like I remember I wasn't very good at football. There was one year that I was great at football, and I just got my head hit too many times, lost intensity, and I was just like, you know what? And I knew that I was never going to make it big. I wasn't like that good by any means. I had one good season where I was crushing kids, and then puberty caught up to everybody else, and they grew, and I was like, okay. Hadn't grown since like grade 7, and they're like behemoths over me, and I just got pummeled. So I knew that wasn't my direction, but I was really good at running. But it wasn't something that I was overly passionate about, right? It was just something that I was naturally skilled, and I just woke up, 3 or 4 mornings out of the week, every day before school, and I'd go for a run. I trained 2 days a week after school with the city track and field team. And then I trained 2 days a week after school with the university track team. And this is in middle school and high school, just because it's something that, I had natural ability in and I was good at. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do more of this because it feels good to win. I liked winning, and I was a really poor loser. I remember, playing sports. If your team started losing, I would stop trying, because then I was like, oh, I didn't actually lose. I didn't try. So you guys couldn't beat me. You guys weren't better. I didn't try. I took myself out. And I was always kind of that, if I can't win, nobody can win, because like they didn't actually deserve it. So I just had this bitch mentality. I never had anybody holding me accountable, standing up to really be a man. And I don't blame my dad for that by any means. He was just very passive, and my parents were very much like, throw him in the deep end, let him learn by himself. But then they did coddle me too much in a lot of ways. And there is some frustration there, because I see my potential and what I could have been, but there's nobody fostering that. But also, you don't know what you don't know. And as a parent, I mean, especially being the first child, you don't really know how you're supposed to condition a kid or how much you can push them, especially when it's somebody like you or I. And I think we're high quality individuals where it's like we always want more, and not everybody thinks like that. And to force somebody into that environment is almost going to scare them away, or make them take a step back and be like, well, fuck you. Like if you want me to do this so bad, why don't you do it? And then they end up resenting them and not doing it. So I think because of the way that it actually ended up, my parents did more for me that way because they weren't there in the ways that I was begging for. Right. And I don't blame them by any means because they were doing the best they had with, or best they could with what they had. But I mean, everybody's got their own faults, whether your parents are still together, whether they're divorced, whether you only have one parent, whether you have no parents. Like everybody has their own struggle. Um, and you don't know what you don't have, kind of thing, right? Um, but just coming back to that, I mean, I never really had that aha moment. I never got it. I was just super lost. I knew that I wanted to do something, and I knew that everything that I picked up, I had natural ability at. And maybe that's cocky to say, but like I could run fast. I could run for a long time. I wasn't the fastest sprinter, but there was always something that I could pick up talent at, right? Whether it was just playing at gym or, playing music or video games, whatever it was that I actually felt like I connected with. All of a sudden, the energy started to build. I knew that if I wanted to take it seriously, it was just going to take the time to do it. But it was just finding the things that I knew that I could do, that I wanted to put the time in. Because at the end of the day, there's a bunch of bullshit that you have to go through. And is the thing that you're doing going to get you excited enough to drag you through the broken glass, the coals, whatever it is that you have to go through? Is that going to be worth it? And is it going to be something that on your worst day, when you're like, this fucking blows, but I love what I do, and it tunes out all the noise? And I hadn't found that yet. And so I started to kind of get into fashion. At the same time, headhunted for a financial company, started to learn financial literacy, and that's something that I always hated. I hated the industry, never wanted to be part of it. So it's funny how I ended up there, a little bit ironic. But it was just the empowerment and the education that I loved.
That's right.
From then on, I could start to make my own decisions. And I mean, if you think about society today, 99% of people's decisions are based on financial. Like, you have to look at your bank account before you make those decisions. It's like, I didn't want that anymore. I wanted my decisions to be mine, not what somebody else is predicated for my life, right? I didn't want it to be based on a paycheck or what, right? When I started to realize how much value I could add and I was being paid for, then I didn't have to live within the confines of, oh, you make this much, this is what you're willing, or this is what you're able to do. Or when somebody asks you what you do, that's the level of respect that they know to give you. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do something different because I don't like fitting into the norm. I don't like the box that I've been forced to be put into. It doesn't make sense to me. I reject it altogether. And so starting to kind of find that, got into fashion. I got burned a lot of times. It's a very toxic industry. Like, if you've seen Zoolander, if you've seen any of the movies or the memes, it's that bad. It's everybody's depressed, everybody's taking advantage of each other in more ways than you could ever imagine. Like, we just had a blip with one of the companies, and it's like, oh, that's the pedophile company. They're all that, right? That's just that whole industry, and that just goes along with entertainment and all of that. And everybody put their tin hats on, right? Because it does kind of get that freaky if you go and look into it and see who's connected. So tread lightly. But I started to realize that, and I was like, okay, well, what do I want to do that's actually going to make an impact in those areas? Once I started getting into the self-development, I love the idea that you could better yourself, that you didn't have to be what they told you to be. But I didn't like this bullshit attitude where they talked about, all the fluff. They made it sound so great and easy. Oh, if it was easy, everybody would do it, and it's easy to talk about it, and everybody listens to these gurus, and
The marketing trap.
it's the marketing
And I
trap.
fell into that, the Tai Lopez thing.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right? Everybody just gets caught in the loop, but there's so much value behind it if you can actually understand what the value is and give your version of the value. That's what people like, but they don't want you to just copy and paste,
That's right.
copy and paste. But if you actually internalize it and you're like, hey, this is how I experienced what he said, this is my version of it, or how it impacted my life, and then you give your version of it, that's what people are looking for. They're looking for the story, the experience. And so just kind of along the way, I definitely took a lot of L's. But that's the way that you learn best, right? I look at it as lessons or wins. I don't look at it as losses or wins, because losses are the way that you're going to actually grow. And I don't know, I could get into that. I won't right now. I'm not preaching, right? But yeah, just getting into fashion and having everything start to kind of click for me. It took a really long time. I probably paid $10,000-$15,000 into the industry before anything started to take off. So a lot of days I'm like, am I just chasing a pipe dream? Is this And I would talk to other people that were part of the self personal development world, and even they wouldn't get it. They're like, oh, you know, like it's cool, but it sounds like a pipe dream. And so there's different levels of that self development, personal development, that kind of genre, where even within that realm, there's certain things that quantify you for success. There's their version of success. And so just taking a step back and saying, well, now I took a step away from what society has told me it takes to be successful. But now I got caught into the trap of what successful people say it takes to be successful, right? These personal development guys, like, oh, you need a Lamborghini, you need whatever it is. Um, or, you know, the new phrase being able to do this, blah, blah, blah. Taking a step back and being like, what is my version of financial independence? Like, what is my version of freedom? What is my version of happiness? What is my version of success? Not what somebody else has spewed into my life and infiltrated my own thoughts and created inception in my mind where I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I want, where it's not, right? I'm like, oh, that sounds cool, but that's not what's something that's going to drive me, that I have an aha moment where all of a sudden everything stops, the noise tunes out, and I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. It took a little bit for me to actually find that. So I mean, like, yeah, I was working in fashion probably for 6 or 7 years. Um, and I thought, you know, designing a clothing line was going to be this 10, 15, 20-year goal that I had, but it wasn't. After 6 years, I was already designing, right? We were talking with one of the royal families, and they had shares to Paris Fashion Week. So I was either going to be walking in the show, I was going to be sitting front row, or my line was going to be in the show, right? This is after modeling, having front covers, center folds multiple times, international publications, modeling, you know, around the world, whether that's in Taiwan or LA, and expanding there. Having conversations with Vogue about going over there before COVID shut everything down, right? As well as styling. So I styled Toronto International Film Festival. The list goes on, right? So I got to see the industry. I got to see fashion. I got to see the whole spread of the industry, and what different direction that you can take. And I realized that what I wanted wasn't going to come from the things that I was doing in the industry. And not only that, but I started to do all these world-class things that I thought that I wanted for the last however long, right? I started to travel the world. I was picking out my dream car. They had a Rolls Royce waiting for us and 2 villas in Dubai. And I wasn't even gonna drive my dream car because they were like, oh, we'll just fly you around by helicopter. And I was like, holy shit, this is literally everything that I've ever wanted. I'm a very monetarily driven person because of the things that I lacked as a kid growing up. And so because of that insecurity, I was like, I need that. I want to have that lifestyle. I want to live it. And I started to do those things, but I didn't do it with the people that I envisioned doing it with. And so I would take, you know, Snapchats and Instagram videos, and I would send it back to the people that I talked about this dream and this vision and idea, and it didn't fulfill me. And I was so shook to my core because I was like, I've been working at this and late nights and early mornings and the tears and sacrifice and losing friends and am I, you know, the self-doubt and the imposter syndrome of, am I doing the right thing? Like, who am I to, I'm just some kid in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, Southern Alberta. Why do I deserve it? But that was my kind of mission from day one, to go and prove that some kid who came from, yeah, literally like, not, I wouldn't say nothing because I didn't come from the slums, right? Like I always had food in the fridge. Like I always had just enough. I always had school supplies for like, you know, new supplies for school. I always had clothes to go to school in, that kind of thing. So I never went without, but I never, the enemy of great is good. And when things are just good enough, when you're just getting by, you're like, oh, it's okay. You know, there's people in Africa that are starving. There's people all over the world that are starving and they don't have enough. But it's like, why are you dimming your light just because somebody else doesn't have enough? And that's not to say that they shouldn't have more, because they should. But what's to say that you shouldn't? What's to say that you don't deserve more? That, like, why are you dimming it down just because, oh, well, you know, maybe it's selfish of me, or whatever it is that you've been brought up socially to say, well, I don't deserve it, or, you know, money's not important, or money doesn't make you happy, or all these, you know, penny saved is a penny earned, whatever the bullshit is that everybody knows, that they've heard money doesn't grow on trees, just the way that society's conditioned you, where it's like, well, no, like, you do deserve it. What do you want? Like, you can go and have everything that you want. There's an unlimited abundance of of anything that you want, of energy that you can tap into once you figure out how to do that. And so that's where I kind of had this moment where I was like, oh shit, I'm doing all these things that I always wanted to do with the people that I don't give a shit about at the end of the day. And it I just had this moment where I was like, okay, something needs to change because I can't continue to do this because I will be depressed because I see the rest of the people in this industry where they have to go and spend $5,000 a day to feel like a man, or they whatever it is, where they have these insecurities and they're so blatantly obvious once you look 1 second deeper, and it's like, I don't want to feel that because I know what it feels like on the way up, because everybody feels that coming in, but you don't have to, right? And once you realize that and start living that way, everything else kind of starts to fall into place, right? It's a chicken or the egg thing, and you always have to be the one taking the first step. That's just how life works, and that's something that I've learned. And so I ended up leaving. I left a 7-figure opportunity, walked away from it, walked away from literally everything that I thought that I ever wanted, the monetary stuff, the limelight, my own design that I thought was going to be this 20-year goal that I had basically got to the manufacturers within not even 9 months. It was probably 3 to 5 months. I was already on the way. I was getting traction. I had my logo. We were sending it to the manufacturers, getting pieces back, and I left it all, right? And I felt like I did a really good job because I left with my head held high. I left with my integrity. And that was something that I would have given up before. I was like, oh, you know what? Like, Jim Carrey always talks about it. I wish everybody could have money and fame and that $1 million so they could see that that's not where, their happiness lies. And I was like, Jim Carrey, fuck off. Like, you have so much, you can't even talk. Because all my problems I thought would disappear. And the monetary ones, the little, like the bullshit that holds you back from being the person that you're supposed to be, yes, those things do totally get solved, right? Like, if you're not worried about, rent coming out or your phone bill or whatever other little mundane things, and you can actually just focus on being a decent person, saying hello to, the guy who's been sitting on the corner begging for money all day and people are giving him dirty looks, and you just, look at him in his eye and make him feel like a person, or those little things that matter, like in between those moments in life where everybody's so caught up. We live in such a fast-paced world, so when you have one of those moments to just break down and see that human connection, that's something that gets me fired up. And I started to see that in finance when I got into it and I was talking to people, and it was weird for me because I don't come from a background of business. And so at first, I didn't really get it, where I was just like, hey, I'm in business, I'd love to talk. And I would just spew information because I was excited and I was passionate and I cared about these people and I wanted to share the message because I had good intention behind it. But people didn't understand that. They didn't understand business. They didn't want to have those conversations. But also, if nobody ever talks to you about business, you don't really know how to talk about business back either, right? People are like, oh, well, what is it? What do you want to talk about? What, like, when it's like, it should be a conversation. Hey, how are you doing? What's new? Hey, I have something where we can both make money. Do you want in or not? Okay, perfect. No? Sweet. Let's still be friends. Don't be weird about it. Say hi when you see me, kind of thing. And people just have this weird dynamic where they lose that, because cat people and dog people can't be friends anymore. You know what I mean? Especially after COVID, it's a very much it's me versus you mentality rather than us versus them. And so that's something I want to break down and just bring that community where people are cheering each other on, where it's not weird to like give high fives and get excited, because it is. Right? Like, people wear those free hug t-shirts. Love that. I'll always give that person a free hug. I love that. People think it's super cheesy, and it is. But if you don't have people doing that, then fuck, everybody's just miserable and depressed, and what's the point of being here? And so I started to have those connections where I was meeting people one-on-one, having those conversations, getting excited about the future, dreaming, thinking, if money and time didn't exist, what would I go do? What would I create? Who would be the person that I could become? Because I have, realistically, I have 100 years on this earth. That's the number that I'm running at. I think with society and medical advances and all those kinds of things, that makes sense for my genetics, all those kinds of things. But what could I do in a century? Right? I'm not even 30 years in. I'm not even a third of the way done. And everybody that's my age, that's almost 30, that's like, oh my God, now it's all downhill. I'm like, that's so depressing to hear. Like, I can't. Like, I'm never getting old. I'm just not going to do it, dude. It sounds like a bad deal. I'm not taking that deal. I'm never getting old. right? You see the old people that are still holding hands. They still giggle and laugh, and old people that can dance, dude. Man, they're doing like the sock hop to like some like young thug or something, and it's so sick. And it's just like that's the energy you need. That people just forget how to be a person. They forget how to be a kid. They forget how to dream and
That's
use their
right.
imagination.
Especially in our age group.
Dude, everybody has a phone, and like it's just been beaten out of you over the head with
That's
a
right.
fucking tablet. And so even just to get outside and go for a walk and brainstorm and that kind of thing, that's why I love getting around hustlers like Kim Chi and all the other people that are in my life that think business and talk that. I'm so grateful and I'm so blessed to have the circle that I do, especially coming from where I come from, because it's not this conversation that's usually talked about, right? Because we do come from, you know, the working class, the middle class, the lower class, whatever it is. You come from a worker's class. You come from, you know, they smash your light bulb in school. They tell you to go get a good job, tell you to get married, pop out a couple kids. Now the family is the family is under attack. So that's not even happening.
Yeah.
Where there's no structure, there's no purpose, there's nowhere for you to fall into the person that you're supposed to be, because there's a light that, like, the world's not done with you, the universe isn't done with you, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And so that's something that I've just kind of slowly started to find, and all these little things came, and that's where I had my aha moment, just connecting with people, building that human relationship. And I love it in finance, but I know that that's not where I can bring those things out of people. I know finance isn't for everybody right now, but at some point in time it will be. So I never see myself leaving that, because the industry's fucked and it needs the right people to uplift it.
That's right.
Because of how scary it is. That's why I will stay there forever, just because of the lack of sincerity and the bad reputation that it has. So that's going to be something that I never leave. But I know that there's a bigger thing where it's like I can pull people's purpose out of them, because everybody's starving for it. Everybody's looking for it. But nobody's going to be the one that takes the initial jump. Like when we went to Hudson's the other night, right?
Yeah.
Everybody was just kind of standing there, and it only takes one person to just go and hit the dance floor.
And everyone,
and I'm not a good dancer
everyone
just
pulled into.
I had the energy. I just move on the beat. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm a terrible dancer, but I love it. I just have fun and I make myself laugh. And if you can't laugh at yourself, you fucking lost already. And so I just dove in the deep end, didn't think about it too much. It's like asking a girl out. You can't go and like walk up to her and be like, "Hey," but you know, like once you said hey, it's like, well, fucking introduce yourself, ask her, you know, something exciting about her that you actually want to know, not just that she has a body, you know what I mean? Because that's about the depth that most guys can get.
hey, you cute.
Yeah, like
in that context where it's just like, oh, it's just the looks, you know.
And like, yeah, I don't know.
And then they dip. Another topic, guys.
Dude,
different topic.
I'm so excited to go into that one, because fuck, people need help.
Yeah. But leading by example, because when you jumped in the dance floor, you led by example.
Dude, and then I just brought the energy. I had fun, and I didn't even care if anybody wanted to dance with me or not. By the end of it, there was a bunch of people, but then there was another moment where everybody left, and a banger came on. And we were going so hard on the dance floor, and it was just so much fun. And just having moments like that where you're connecting with people, and just what it's like to be a kid again. Right? And just like dream and get excited, use your imagination, have fun, giggle, cry sometimes, you know what I mean? Just have all of those feelings that you're supposed to have, that as a society you've had to repress and mitigate and almost act like a robot, but not. Right? You have to be a robot, but just enough of a person so that people are like, oh, he's cool. And so just starting to break down those barriers in myself, just in a way where I'm having fun with it, having fun with life, having everything fall into place. So, I mean, because of my background, everything that we're doing, I'm super excited about that. And I don't really know exactly what this next chapter looks like, but I know what the end goal is. And just figuring out that was a huge game changer for me, because I knew the idea that I wanted, but it was always fluff. It was always something here, it was there, it was never organized. And so the fact that I've condensed it down, figured out what I want, and it's these checkpoints, right? And that's going to grow and evolve as I grow and evolve. But just through the experiences that I've had, the people that I've met, the opportunities that have arisen, and the failures that I've moved through, I've come to the place that I'm at, the people that I've met, and I'm starting to fall in this line where I'm like, okay, I'm understanding what my purpose is. How does it play into, you know, my strengths? Where can I add value to people and give them something that is going to actually create, like, break the chains that they've been held down with, right? Everybody has these things, but nobody knows the questions to ask themselves to actually get there. And so to be able to create that and just get people excited to live again is really it. I think so many people are just going through the motions, right? They're on a hamster wheel. They don't really know what they're doing it for. They're in this very big era of treat yourself. And so it's like living for today, and they get caught up in that. And then it's like, okay, well, if it's always dopamine, if it's always serotonin, if it's always this microwave society where it's instant gratification, then there's no way that you can actually learn to do the things that's going to feel like shit but make you feel better, if that makes any sense. And
Yeah.
anybody who's done any sort of those things, whether that's go to school, work out, everybody's done them. But if you actually register and understand why you're doing it, is a completely different
The
conversation.
why. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So just breaking that down, getting into it, having some fun with it, right? Like, we're only here for a short time. If you're not having fun with it, and your definition of fun can be whatever the fuck you want. Mine is having business conversations, dreaming, you know, going out in the right way with the right people, traveling the world, meeting new people from around the globe, whatever, right? But just have fucking fun, right? Learn to dance in the rain, and don't take it too seriously. So that's, I think, my story. That's where I'm at. I've had that aha moment. I know where I'm going now, and I mean, tune in.
Boom, guys. Welcome to the Ben Willis Manifesto 2023, Part 1. Hope you love that story. Hope you got a lot of value from that. If you do want way more value, because we got more free stuff to give away, join the Wolfpack Inner Circle or follow Ben Willis. Give him a DM or give myself DM kimchi.slice. We'd love to get to know you a little bit more. Share your story. Let's connect. Let's get together with other like-minded people. Again, this is not a sales pitch. There's no weird ill intentions. If you feel like you want to resonate with a lot of people like us, this is for you. If you're just here to sell each other shit, this is not for you.
Get lost.
All right, guys. Peace out. See you in the next video.